All right, Adam, thank you so much for doing this, for coming on the podcast. Hope you're well. Can you let the listeners know who you are and what do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my name is Adam Bridegan. I'm the chief marketing officer for Rhone. Rhone is a men's premium activewear brand that was founded in 2014. And really, my career has spanned primarily focused on e-commerce and investing in startups. But no, I'm excited to be here with you.
Fantastic. So, what were you like, sort of like in your early years? Did you have a marketing mind from like an early age, or like what? Like maybe walk me through like you kind of getting into college, that kind of thing. Like, what was your
Yeah.
childhood like?
So, man, I'm a huge fan of music. I'm not very artistic. I have a very analytical brain, so I played sports, very competitive when it comes to sports. So played basketball, soccer, football, and ended up landing kind of soccer throughout high school. And you know, I, I would say I really just didn't know what I wanted to do other than I enjoyed school, but I really enjoyed sports. And it wasn't until college and talking to some peers and, some just anyone that I could find that I felt like was successful. Just, what should I go to school for? What should I study? And everyone kind of recommended, well, since you don't know exactly what, like, I didn't have a passion to be a doctor, right? Like, and I think a lot of people just kind of know and like that's kind of their calling. And for me, it was like, well, man, I just want to do something and be successful and be and work really, really hard. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's real estate or whatever. But the advice that I got was to go and study finance, just to to make sure that I had a really strong background and that I could get a job if I needed to. So that's what I did. I went and got a degree in finance and started working as an analyst and thought that I would go towards Wall Street and that was kind of like the dream while you're in the finance program. But after 3 years as an analyst, I was like, wow, this is awful, right? Like every day looking at Excel, building pricing models, and I just did not have a passion there. And so I was really getting burned out after 3 years as an analyst and decided to join a startup. And as I joined a startup, it was all of a sudden I went from 3 years of very structured, like this is what you need to do and here's what you're responsible for. And then as a startup, it was like, hey, we need help with marketing. And I was like, wow, like there's this whole digital marketing place. There's this Google, there's Facebook, and there's all this advertising. And then I quickly learned that my financial background would play a pivotal role in my career, right? Because what was happening was this digital transformation where all of the advertising and all of the e-commerce was very oriented in analytics as far as what you could track, how you could monitor things. And that really I would say really propelled my career and my focus of just making sure that I understood the nuts and bolts of marketing and the all of the math behind what goes into a customer acquisition cost, what goes into lifetime value. All of that really laid a solid foundation. And then I kind of rediscovered, the artistic side of my brain, whereas like, very analytical and structured. But then all of a sudden when you're doing marketing and it's like, ooh, well, like what if this works? Right. And then how can I test this on a campaign? And that's where I really found the passion for marketing was it's like this blended approach where you can use both sides of your brain and and you kind of uncover all of these things about yourself that you had no idea. You were like, oh, I never thought I was artistic until I was put in this circumstance where I had to think about branding, or I had to think about positioning and thinking about marketing personas, right? So that to me just kind of unlocked, and from there doors opened. I joined a few different startups. Some of them failed miserably, some of them were very successful, and then went and worked at Priceline, where was managing millions of dollars in online marketing and truly just loved everything that I was doing there. And then about 6 years ago, Nate Checketts and I became friends, and he told me about his business idea to start Rhone. And, you know, at the time I was ready to go. I was like, okay, this is, I'm ready to roll the dice after being with, a big multi-billion-dollar corporation, and wanted to take a little bit more risk, and kind of the rest is history.
And so how did you land at that multi-billion dollar corporation? Was that through some form of exit, or kind of like maybe walk through some of those career experiences that you
Yeah,
had?
no. So that reference was Priceline. Priceline and the Booking Group is a massive online travel agency, and just the amount of exposure that we had to Google and Facebook and all of the different teams that we are working with as far as A/B testing when it comes to the e-commerce website, all of that, and just the responsibility that I had to manage that type of budget just really opened my eyes as far as how to scale all of the different units of a marketing team. And for example, making sure that you have a really solid foundation in data and analytics and attribution modeling. And so because of the sheer budgets that we had and the access to data and the reporting that we had, it helped me understand some of the issues that happens when it comes to marketing technology and attribution, right? And making sure that you put the checks and balances in place, because I think that that's one of the biggest challenges that most direct to consumer brands face when they read in all of the publications and online articles about kind of how do you build direct to consumer advertising, and then if you don't understand the marketing technology and the way that their attribution counts things, it can lead you into a very, I would say, destructive path where it becomes growth at all costs. And what I mean by that is you can read ample examples of brands that spend their way to hitting top of line growth numbers, but realizing when you back into the math as far as all the money that they're spending, and not accounting for the overlap from different channels, they're actually losing massive amounts of money. And then they have to continue to raise money to hit those numbers because they don't have that structure in place when it comes to their modeling. And so that's what I really mean in that regard. But because of that background and understanding some of those challenges, it's helped me as we've built Rhone over the last 6 years to be very conservative with how we're spending our money, and to make sure that we have the data and technology in place. Because if you don't have that, and then all of a sudden you're just throwing money around, it gets you into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but I'm gonna try to stay focused. Um, so maybe talk a little bit about like your day to day as a CMO, and kind of like what were the early days of Rhone like? Like what were you guys doing in the first year, like compared to what you do now?
Well, I think the benefit to joining a startup is the ability to wear multiple hats, right? And to learn, and the pace at which you're able to learn. So day to day coming in Rhone was, okay, let's set up Google Analytics. Okay, let's set up Shopify. Let's set up all of the different apps. Let's set up a customer service team. Let's set up our customer reviews. And you're doing a lot of setting up, right? And just because you have nothing, and so let's get something. And so in the early stages, it's making sure that we're getting enough data on and getting those things in place. So, okay, is our website being indexed by Google, right? And getting all of those things from the organic search in place. And again, when you don't have money, it forces you to learn fast. It forces you to be very scrappy. So we were doing everything that we possibly could that was free, that was, building the content. I knew from, my days at Priceline and others, how important organic search is. And when you don't have money and you have to build the content. So I mean, that was one of the first things that we did was build content that is now paying dividends 6 years later. And so we actually outranked some of these big brands like Target and others for a lot of keywords because of the work that we did 6 years ago, right? By playing by the rules. So I think the day to day was just getting everything set up until we knew that we were at a place like, hey, if we had another hire, there's enough of an efficiency here that it's going to be worth our investment in this person. So it was getting Facebook and Google and all of our advertising platforms in place. And then when we realized, okay, Adam doesn't have enough time to do all of this, now we can start hiring, right? And so I think there's kind of that point where you do have to put in kind of the blood, sweat, and tears to get everything up and running, just to start getting sales coming through. And then once you do, it's just layering on the different pieces. So
Yes.
if yeah, and my day to day now is, now that I've built our team, we have our branding team, we have our community team, which is responsible for all of our product seeding, all of our events and influencers, things like that. And then we have a performance marketing team whose job is to on all the mathematics that go into scaling our business. So paid social, paid search, and exploring all these new platforms like programmatic television, programmatic direct mail, all of those areas. But it's taken us 6 years to do that, and we've been very methodical. So my day to day now is just making sure that I have the KPIs from all these different groups and that I'm helping in all these areas to drive the company forward.
And to that point, to today's point, I guess when you think about e-commerce and you think about, growth and kind of where we're going, I mean, what do you see as either a trend now that maybe has legs, or what do you think is the future of sort of the direct to consumer model? I mean, we've kind of seen, whether it's Facebook ads, um, you know, I mean, before that, Google. I mean, do you see like what are you seeing as I mean, going into television, like what type of growth, like what gets you excited, or that you see
Yeah, yeah.
potential in?
Well, first and foremost, I don't have a crystal ball, right? Like, and I'm a very, to me, the data has to prove itself. And so I think a lot of different, you know events and like, I would say, industry events that you could go to, everyone's kind of asking that same question. Like, what should we be doing that we're not doing, and what is everyone most excited about? And it really just depends on the company as far as how they're built, as far as where they're at, and what's going to be the you know most profitable for them, and yield the most growth. But I can tell you from my perspective, I think that there's a massive opportunity with some of the data technology that's coming on the attribution side for streaming and television. I think there's a massive opportunity in streaming. I think historically television ads were very difficult to quantify and measure. A lot of them were reserved for the McDonald's of the world, the big brands that could spend $50 million and just say it's a branding effort, right? And awareness. But I do think that streaming has come a long way. There's a lot of platforms that are going to help us to quantify the lift and get to really put, I would say, substantial budgets behind that. Um, I think there's a lot of arbitrage opportunities even now with Instagram, Facebook. I think there's going to be, additional social platforms like TikTok and others where I'm not one who believes that, the Facebook CPMs are so high that you can't make it work, right? And I think that's a pretty myopic view from a lot of marketers, that it's like, oh, the CPMs are raising, oh, we need to find something else. Well, I think we need to take a step back and say we need to create better content, right? We need to improve our conversion rates as us as marketers on these different channels. And yes, there's going to be some channels that don't fit for your brand. because of the cost. But I think that's in many ways typically a scapegoat where it's just looking for something new. Um, I mean, so the things that get me excited, I think there's still a massive opportunity when it comes to influencers and on the different platforms, how we work with them and athletes and things like that. Um, and, on the programmatic television, I would say those two areas get me really excited, and I'm excited to test them and see what they yield for us.
Any thoughts on Facebook sort of campaign budget optimization? I mean, I don't know how much in the weeds you are with that sort of thing, but uh, ABOs versus CBOs, kind of just like iterating on creatives, just like what do you, I mean, to your point, like, I think you're right. There's still a big opportunity with Facebook and Instagram. And, if you're still kind of maintaining a level of, you know, customer acquisition that sort of makes sense for the business model, it's kind of like, well, CPMs, who cares? But I'd love to hear your thoughts, from your seat, how you think about
Yeah.
those variables.
So I would say from a Facebook and Instagram perspective, it really depends on the brand and what their goals are, whether it's, app downloads or just getting people to watch their videos. I think everyone kind of has their own unique funnel, depending on who you're targeting and what the lead time to conversion is. So I think it varies. I will tell you, for us, it comes down to just making sure that our customer cohorts, our segmentation is as defined and refined as possible, right? To me, it's, if you're going to win on content, you need the right content to be hitting the right cohorts. And oftentimes, I think most brands kind of just pray and just spray. And it's from a budget standpoint, right? Where it's just like, okay, like we have $3,000. We think this is our person. We're going to go after them, versus very targeted um, campaigns for a specific purpose that fits into their unique funnel. And so for us, I mean, if we're doing a video campaign and we want to just get people their first exposure into hearing about the brand, well, I'm going to optimize that differently as far as a budget, as far as who goes in this cohort, whether or not they're existing customers or prospects. I think you brand as granular as they can possibly be, I think is going to help them when it comes to optimization. I think there's plenty of talent and free information available to founders out there when they're just getting started. And you can watch YouTube videos and others, but I think it's great to learn all of those things, but you need to really do what is best for your brand. And I think you zig where people zag. And what I mean by that is, if every brand and everyone's doing the same thing and everyone looks the same and has the same value propositions, well, my hypothesis would be, well, if I'm going to do that and expect that I'm going to get some sort of different return, it's just not going to happen, right? In my opinion. So when approaching those things, I'm going to try to do something different from a creative perspective, or test different, you know, price points as far as what I'm willing to spend to drive that action.
And to the creative point, how do you think about kind of sourcing those assets? Is that something that you like to have that in-house? Do you like to work with agencies and freelancers and influencers? How do you do that?
Yeah, so for us, we do have an internal branding content team. It's an amazing, again, these are really talented individuals who think very differently and are willing to test. And everything kind of goes through them. But we do augment that team with a lot of different content creators around the US and the globe, because as we're expanding to these different places, like the type of content that one would create for LinkedIn is different than what you would create for Instagram, and that's completely different than what you would create for TikTok. And unfortunately, when you don't have budgets and you have a very limited time, what happens is you create a piece of content, and then what do? You share it across all these different social channels. Over time, you realize the inefficiencies of that approach. And so I think we're now at that scale where each individual channel, and when we think about the growth potential of that channel, is how much time and effort we dedicate towards content on that channel, right? So for us, like, we're still this brand that is new and fresh, and we still have not touched a lot of these buying personas and demographics. So for us, I'm getting content creators this year that have looked very differently than 2 to 3 years ago, right? Younger demographics, you know, athletes and others, and dancers and musicians, like things that when you're just starting, for us, it was just starting, you know, gym trainers and others. Now we're really trying to expand that horizon. So we need different content creators, and we're at a point now where yes, we can curate that and have a budget allocated towards that. And you know, our budget's not anywhere near some of the big box brands, but I still think that we're scrappy enough that we're going to figure it out with the content creators that we have on making sure that we bring in more to the fold.
And I guess other than my guest that I had that was a TikTok creator himself, you're probably the only guest that's kind of mentioned TikTok a couple times. Are you all on the platform? And if so, kind of like what are the thoughts on it?
It's actually, in full transparency, I was just on a call with him today because we are just getting ready to launch, and we're really excited, very bullish on the growth of this channel. And to me, it's a new and exciting way for people to hear about Rhone and to kind of see this different side of us, right? Whereas I think, you know, when you start your brand, you kind of have this thesis as far as exactly who you're targeting, and what you realize is that it evolves, right? Like over time, as you bring more people in, and as your product line and your assortment evolves, there's this growth. And so to me, it's kind of like this invigorating experience for TikTok, just knowing that there's mountains of content creators that are going to bring a unique perspective to what Rhone can mean for them in their life, right? And so whether or not they're, you know, on Broadway and they are doing these dance routines, like I, I want Rhone to be there, right? Like I want Rhone to be involved with these creators, and really just helping them, or allowing them to see what they can do with our products, right? And our product is made for guys to be active, to be comfortable and active. Regardless if you're working out in the gym, we understand that everyone's not working out in the gym. So great. So whatever you're doing to be active, like I want to see what you can create for us. And so that's how I think we are going to approach TikTok, is like people, and you also have to think about why people go to TikTok, right? And why do they go to Instagram? Why do they go to LinkedIn? For us, like if you're opening TikTok and we're just like, oh, hey, do you want to buy this shirt? Like, no, that's not where they're there. They're there because they want to be entertained. They want to relax. They want their brain to just decompress from all the stresses, and they want to laugh. So like we need to be there. Like we need to make sure that Rhone is creating content that they want to laugh about, not we're just trying to push product. And so that to me as a marketer is really exciting, just like all these other different channels. So I think as long as we remain open and flexible to that, we really can't go wrong. I think what the challenge is when brands go on there and they keep doing what they think they should be doing, right, for their brand, and then they don't allow themselves to really experiment or embrace what the reason why people go to that certain platform. And I think that's, you know, they're dead on arrival.
Yeah, that's great. Um, Speaking of other channels, what about like text marketing, text message? Any thoughts there, just generally?
Yeah, so I would say if you had asked me that same question a year ago, I would have been like, man, I don't know how people feel about receiving text messages from brands. And I think your phone historically has just been, one of those areas where you want privacy. You don't want to be bothered unless you've, engaged with something, and it's like a push notification. But even then, it just felt like disjointed. However, I do think that that is changing, because I think people are now realizing that their device is kind of everything to them, right? Like it's like their portable laptop. They can do all their work, and they can, constantly checking email, but it's also their entertainment device too. So I also think it depends on kind of the cohort of customer and the age demographic too. But it does seem to me, with the data and engagement that I'm looking at, that people are becoming more open to engaging with a brand via text message, via SMS. And so you're seeing a kind of this explosion of technology with chatbots and a lot of platforms built to help you basically create an identical experience as a marketer from what you would do on the email side to the SMS side, as far as, drip campaigns and nurturing campaigns. So I think we are going to tread lightly in this area, but I will say, like most other brands, we have seen some really positive initial results.
How do you stay on top of all this? I know before COVID, there were, maybe a plethora of conferences or, just, I don't know, industry organizations. How do you kind of, you know, kind of educate yourself and kind of stay, with a methodical approach to all this?
Yeah, again, I don't pretend like I have all the answers, or I know what like the next platform that's going to blow up is going to be. Um, I I do read a lot. Like I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn and a lot of time on kind of industry reporting, CNBC, just understanding what's happening in retail, understanding what's happening in these areas. I personally don't attend a lot of conferences. I maybe go to one or two a year, and I've just been to enough where it seems like most of the time people just kind of want an escape and an excuse to, drink
Go to
alcohol.
Vegas.
Yeah, yeah. Which again, I have nothing, if that's how you want to do it, fine. But for me, it's like if I'm going to give away time from my family and my kids, like I better get an ROI on that time investment. And so I'm just very selective of those opportunities. I do think there's a lot of great learnings just from being at those conferences and hearing about them. But you also have to understand too that even if a brand is absolutely crushing an area, they're not exactly going to give you a case study as far as the X, Y, and Z is how they did that at a conference. It might be one thing from an agency if they are able to share information as far as what they've done for a client, but I think very rarely do brands get up there and say, well, here's exactly what we did and here's why you should do it too, because everyone knows internally that like you're building this internal secret sauce as far as your data stack and all of these things. And the last thing that you want to do is go out there and share it with competitors and things like that. So it's just, I think you just have to be very cautious with the information that is being shared. And if it's general, like certain channels of things that they've done, great. And I think agencies have some of that flexibility to share. But for the most part, again, I only attend maybe two or three conferences a year. Most of my learning just comes from um, keeping in contact with a lot of CMOs and a lot of marketers in the space, and just sharing best practices with them and seeing what type of trends they're doing, knowing that the data that we're sharing is agnostic, right? Like no one's giving anyone trade secrets, but hey, if I can talk to the CMO of, this other brand, I'm not going to name names, but that's typically who I will go to first. Like if I'm getting pitched on a software or something, you're probably, I mean, I'm not gonna, I will listen to you, but like, I know you're a salesperson. I'm gonna go and talk to another CMO who's actually using you to get a reference as far as, hey, this is what they're telling me. Give me the real story, right?
Like that. And you mentioned some investing, right?
Yeah.
What's the angel investing side of this look like for you? Are you
I mean,
doing a lot
it's,
of deals or
no, definitely not doing a lot of deals. To me, it's if I feel that I can be a strategic partner in an investment from, if I understand the business and I understand where they're going, then yes, I will invest some of my own money. But it's not like, hey, I'm this massive investor. No, not by any stretch of the imagination. But it's something that I'm finding more and more passion for. Just, over the last 6 years of being at Rhone and seeing some of the all the key learnings and mistakes that I've made. If I can help other e-commerce brands or other brands scale, and I know, hey, you're gonna hit this wall, right? Like, avoid this wall. And if I feel like I can do that and the business is attractive to me, then yeah, I will. I'll make an investment.
yeah, it's great. And I guess what's the process like for that? Are you going through referrals like you're getting, I don't know, other investors maybe, present the opportunity to you, or do you just take unsolicited like pitch decks across your email, or
No,
like how do
yeah,
you kind of
I definitely don't take on, any pitch decks. All of it has really just been kind of referrals of people who have said, hey, I've got this person and, this friend, and they're starting this business. Would you be willing to take a look at it and help them out? And the ones that I, through that trust factor, if I look at it and it is something attractive and I'm like, wow, I really think that with a little bit of capital and a little bit of advice, of just, you know, strategic advice, then, and if it makes sense, then yeah, I will. But, again, like, it's a passion that, who knows down the road what that looks like. But I think, even you as an entrepreneur, it's I mean, starting a business and bootstrapping a startup is tough. Like, people don't understand how much it sucks, right? Like, it really sucks sometimes. Like, it's the lowest of lows, but it's also the highest of highs, right? And the stress and the anxiety is real. And so when you've been through it, like, you just come out so much stronger. It's like working out, man. When you're working out, it sucks, right? And like, you're like, why do I do this? But then after, you feel great. And so that's kind of like where I found my passion for startups was, I was like, what in the world am I doing? I have all this gray hair. I'm stressed out all the times. I haven't been able to take a vacation. You know, my kids are always asking me for help, and then I'm like yelling at them because I'm so stressed out, right? Like, it's real. But now that, like, you've seen some of the success and you've seen some of the growth, you're like, wow, I really, like, I kind of enjoyed this roller coaster. So I want to help others with this roller coaster. And so, I think that's really what it boils down to. It's kind of this unique experience where after you've been through it, you kind of want to do it again, right?
maybe it sucks. I mean, when you say it sucks, I mean I felt it. It is challenging. COVID does not help. Um, I was going to ask you about what do you see yourself doing long term? Like, are you a career sort of startup guy at this point? Would you say? Would you Rome becomes, uber successful, which it already, you guys are already massive, but, beyond measure where you're exiting. So let's say, would you start over again in those organic days and, starting to set up analytics and all this? Would you do that again? Because that's an interesting, I, I have different guests that, some are just like, I'll do it again. And then I've got some that are just like, this is it, I'm done. So I'm curious kind of
Yeah.
how you feel about that.
Well, I mean, It's a great question. It's something, that I'm starting to think more and more about. Um, I mean, I have 3 kids and an amazing wife,
Whew.
and um, I'm kind of at that stage where like I wanna go to my kids' basketball games, right? Like I wanna go to their sporting events. And for the last 6 years, I haven't been able to do that, right? Just because everything was so dependent on us to just figure it out, right? Like your job is just figure it out and make the company successful. And right. And it's like this massive burden that you put on yourself. And so I think long term for me is more on the investing and advisory side of like I would want to help founders be successful, right? And I I think I don't I'm the type of person, and I've discovered this about myself is I don't need to be the number one. I don't need
Yeah,
to be
don't
the
take the headache home over the weekend.
yeah, like I don't need to be the CEO, the founder to feel good about myself. And I'm totally fine being the silent person in the background that's helping the company be successful. And that's the role honestly that I've played with Rhone is like I don't want to be front and center. I don't have to be out there. I'm totally fine being in the background, and 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 that's worked. And so for me, I think if I can continue to do that, where advising, investing, and helping these companies be successful, and just make sure that they don't waste a lot of money, right? Like, I think that would be enough for me to keep me going. Like, I still get excited about the business opportunities as far as where they're going and the growth potential, but I think it would be more of, hey, I'm gonna, cut back my hours so that I can actually spend more time with the kids. Is kind of where I'm at right now at this stage of my life.
I respect that. What about COVID? Like, how have you adapted? What what are some of the things that you think as we start this reopening process? I mean, what are you seeing as like silver linings, like just broad strokes? Like, how are you kind of processing
Yeah.
it all?
Honestly, like number one, first and foremost, I think I'm full of gratitude in the sense of it has forced me to focus more on my health, my wellness, to focus more on my family, to express a lot of the blessings from God, right? Like that to me is really like it's given me this time to really reflect and just be like, wow, like it's your health is your number one asset, right? And I think that's honestly, I think that's a really important for the world. And you're starting to see just some really great things happening as far as love and humanity. And I think that's huge. As far as on the business side, I think there's certain market conditions that happen, and either they can make or break you as an entrepreneur and as a business person. Unfortunately, I think there were so many brands that were so leveraged and so focused on growth and so focused on traditional retail that you're starting to see the bankruptcies. You're starting to see things that there was trouble before, and then this just like just greatly exploded the time frame for when those things were going to come to fruition, right? And so when I look at that and I'm like, okay, there's this changing landscape of retail. Well, how can I use this as a benefit, right? Like if this is changing, well, how do I adapt to this and be a winner? How do I be a competitor in this space? So to me, like, do I think retail will eventually bounce back in some fashion? Yes, right? Like I don't think people are going to stop shopping like that. But I do think behavior is going to evolve, right? Like I don't know if certain malls are going to see the same foot traffic as before. And so that means that some of the stores are going to have to adapt. I do think that there's a place for virtual experiences with retail that are going to be highly, I would say, less transactional but more human based interaction. And so what I mean by that is, like, if I need a certain product and it's an expensive product, and I have a lot of questions about it, I think it's going to be the brands that invest in the virtual experience as far as telling the stories, having staff available to answer questions virtually, um, advancements in chat and things like that. I think all of those technologies are going to allow brands to win in this new landscape, right? I think customers will still have the same questions, and depending on the purchase, like, that's not going to change. It's just how they transact, and making sure that you as a brand are communicating and educating them better than your competitors. So I think there's a massive opportunity there. Whether or not people, remain 6 feet away from each other in the future until there's a vaccine, I don't know, right? But I think, knowing what we know now, you have to focus on your e-commerce experience, right? We know that that's massive, and brands have been focusing on that for a long time. But the ones who kind of take it to the next level, try to do something different, I think are the ones that really excite me, which is like, what can we do now to give people a better shopping experience, knowing that things have changed. And so that, again, I'm very excited on the retail side, because I think there's going to be a lot of winners that come out of this who were kind of unheard of before, but were doing things in a strategic, methodical way. Whereas a lot of the people who kind of everyone pointing the finger as, like, oh, we want to be like them, I think those brands are going to be the ones that are in some serious trouble.
Well said. Well, this has been great, Adam. Thank you again for your time and the pearls of wisdom. Where can the listeners kind of follow you or check you out?
Yeah. Well, I think the easiest thing to do is just connect with me on LinkedIn. I mean, I think LinkedIn is such a powerful platform that many underutilize. Think about the amount of people that you can connect with, and automatically you have access to ask them questions and do things like that. So it's such a powerful content platform.
Adam, I think we're frozen. I don't know if you can still hear me, but